Welcome once again to our study of the Bodhisattva Guide, which is His Holiness, 14th Dalai Lama's commentary on Shantideva's great Mahayana classic, The Way of the Bodhisattva. So, as always, kindly recognizing the value of this study, dedicate this effort in terms of understanding how this is directed towards the cause of all suffering everywhere. So with that appreciation of the value of this and the object of the undertaking of practicing the path, being the liberation of all sentient beings, all life everywhere, no less, then we develop this enlightened attitude. And we'll begin with these opening chants. Abandon evil doing, practice virtue well, subdue your mind. This is the Buddha's teaching. Like a star, an optical illusion or a flame, a magical illusion, a dewdrop or a bubble, like a dream, a flash of lightning or a cloud, so should one consider all compounded things. In the jewels of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, we take refuge until we attain enlightenment. By the merit of practicing generosity and the like, may we attain Buddhahood for the benefit of beings. In the jewels of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, we take refuge until we attain enlightenment. By the merit of practicing generosity and the like, may we attain Buddhahood for the benefit of beings. In the jewels of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, we take refuge until we attain enlightenment. By the merit of practicing generosity and the like, may we attain Buddhahood for the benefit of beings. So we'll begin actually just going back a little bit, because somebody I really appreciate that, made a point about there's a difficult point in the last section we covered. Not really difficult, but it is what sometimes in the Tibetans they call it, in Dharma language, we call it kane, which means difficult point. And it's not that it's that difficult, but it's something that sort of goes against ordinary habitual logic, but it also paves the way to definitely based on an enlightened logic, an insightful logic. And it's provocative in the sense that going against our habitual patterns, it actually opens up for a tremendous perspective and tremendous experience. But it's based on reasoning. It's based on us actually recognizing something that we ordinarily don't, in ways that we ordinarily don't think about things. And that's where Shantideva, he says, those who harm me, rise against me. It's my karma that has summoned them. And if through these beings go to hell, is it not I who bring their ruin? Okay, so there's people who are bothering us in one way or another. But the point is, where does that come from? And in the Buddhist teaching, we don't actually believe in chance. We don't believe that things just happen randomly, not from some sort of predestined or predetermined script, but it's just like you plant an apple seed, you get an apple tree. You do a particular action of aggression, it creates a mindset that experiences aggression. We construct and habituate ourselves to a particular outlook that is tainted by a particular attitude and becomes part of us. So that's what we mean with karma. So this perception of somebody that's harming us, you know, the example I'm always giving, somebody takes our parking place. It's obviously a problem I have. But you know, that kind of feeling of, damn, see, they're not at all ill-intended particularly, and for them it's a great thing. It's uniquely from our point of view that it's bad. If somebody attacks us, they might see us as an evil person, they might have some agenda or reason or whatever, but it's uniquely from our particular perspective that it's negative. So us constructing this in terms of a negative thing is something to do with our particular outlook that has to do with our vantage point. And we're not suggesting that anybody then changes around and all of a sudden becomes martyrs, doormats, all these kind of unhealthy, you could say, practices. But we're just saying that when we talk about karma, we're talking about something in which we actually take a particular position and construct events in a particular way. So it's our karmic projection that sees a particular event as being something that harms or rises against us. And in that sense, there is also you could say, an interaction that takes place with others. We have particular karma with others. So this, of course, is a famously widely misunderstood aspect of Buddhist science that is very often sort of lined up with cliche thinking, and very often sort of just mocked or just sometimes turned into embarrassingly simplistic cliches and all of that. But well aware of that, let's give Shantideva the benefit of the doubt, and he might be saying something that is profoundly insightful, profoundly true. And that's where the truth of this lies in this understanding of the nature of our perceptions as being determined by the seeds and the attitudes that we've planted and that we've cultivated within our personal being. And so, yes, we would say that this situation that is unpleasant, it's something that is due to the actions that we have done ourselves. We've created the basis for this. Now, in that we have this situation with others and they are acting in a particular way, while we can actually see the nature of this, others might not, and they will perpetuate their own experience of, in this case, aggression. And that's where the result of aggression in and of itself is to go to hell, in the sense that you're creating causes for an experience of aggression that lives in yourself and you project onto the environment. And that is almost by definition what hell is. So that's where of course, when we talk about karma, we also understand that karma really is a law of cause and effect, but also mitigated by circumstances. So there's no such a thing as you do this and that results. Well, you can say that, yes. You could say apple seed gives apple tree, but also the way that this process of becoming the result is mitigated by circumstances. So if the tree has ideal circumstances, it grows big. If it has not ideal, it perhaps doesn't grow in that way. It grows in however, but on the basis of the circumstances. So actions, yes, they can take us to hell, but they can also be the effect can be mitigated by all sorts of circumstances. That's why we would always say that there's the only good quality about negative actions are that they can be purified. So of course, these kind of proclamations about the results need to be understood not as some sort of absolute decree about things, but rather based on an understanding how actions lead to particular results. But in understanding then what happens with this other person who aggresses on us, and in fact that it's our karmic situation that has created this, which has a lot to do with us, and in fact they'll end up suffering, then isn't it actually us who are responsible here? Now, we're not also taking this to some unhealthy extent where all of a sudden we should take upon ourselves that we were the source of every suffering in the world, but we're just actually challenging this habitual projection onto the other as being bad. And that's why we're saying, hey, I got a part of this, and in fact, I could actually, through practicing patience, I could actually benefit through this situation, oddly enough, and they not having possibly a clue about how to benefit from this particular situation and acting in aggression, they're actually going to suffer. So here I am benefiting and they are just suffering. So that's the gist of this, in the sense that it completely turns it around. We might think, oh, they're going to benefit from harming us and we're innocent and all of that. It's the other way around. So this is something this is a great example of something that we hear it, and it might just be so counter to the way that we think things that it sort of gnaws at us, and we just sit and wonder, what does he mean? Now, of course, we're going to have His Holiness's commentary here, which will clarify. But still, this is such a well, certainly we could say unconventional way of seeing things, but it is based on, like I was saying, an enlightened logic that actually looks at really what are the elements of this situation. So His Holiness says, the wrongs other people do to us are the direct result of our past actions. These actions have in fact caused our adversaries to harm us. From this point of view, it is we who are harming our opponents, for in the future they will suffer because of the harmful act we ourselves have instigated. Okay. There was somebody last time saying, can you please go over 47 one more time? But of course, we can't dwell on this indefinitely, but it is something that is provocative, and it's so, I can only say it's so worthwhile pondering this. His Holiness continues, when others harm us, it gives us the chance to practice patience and thus to purify numerous negative actions and to accumulate much merit. So we completely turn around in terms of where does this all come from and who is actually benefiting and not benefiting from the situation, to also then beginning to appreciate this situation. We're actually purifying karma. And I think I gave the example last time about Paulshambacha and the students that got angry at a hunter when in fact the hunter was really the object of, should really be the object of compassion. So that's where we understand, but only this applies to ourselves, of course. So that's where when we're exposed to something that's difficult, it's actually an opportunity to practice negative actions, and through our persevering in patience, accumulating merit. And again, what we mean with merit means actions in which we are proactively connecting with awakening. So it's the kind of good karma that connects us to enlightenment, if you like. Since it is our enemies, His Holiness says, who give us this opportunity, in reality, they are helping us. But because they're committing negative actions, and we are the cause of these, we're actually harming them. Okay? So they're actually helping us, giving an opportunity to practice. We're actually not doing them any good. They're doing us everything good, and yet us being the object of whatever it is, negative actions, we're actually the cause of their accumulating negative karma. So here we are in this interaction, benefiting, and the others not benefiting. We're accumulating merit, they're accumulating negative karma. So if there is anyone to get angry with, it should be ourselves. Okay, now this is, of course, again, this is not to engender some sort of self-loathing or self-hatred and all of that, but it is to shift the perspective. So if there is anyone to get angry with, meaning who created this samsaric situation to begin with? That's us, that's our confusion. So you could say for all karmic phenomena, yes, we are to be blamed. At the same time, it's not intended to, you could say, be down on ourselves, but just to understand that the idea that there's somebody else to be blamed, that's actually founded on some flawed assumptions. So His Holiness says we should never be angry with our enemies, regardless of their attitude, since they are indeed useful to us. Okay. One might therefore wonder whether, by thus causing our enemies to accumulate negative actions, we accumulate negative actions ourselves, and whether our enemies, in so helping us to practice patience, have accumulated positive actions. That's a legitimate argument, right? Here we are benefiting. Well, are they then accumulating good karma because here were they actually the cause of us progressing on the path to enlightenment? So unfortunately, His Holiness points out, this is not the case. Although we have been the cause for their negative actions by our practicing patience, we actually accumulate merit, and will not take rebirth in the lower realms. It is we who have been patient. That's the thing. It all depends on what's happening within the mind, not in terms of the actions. So here we are perpetuating a practice or sustaining a practice of patience, one of the paramitas, one of those actions that take us beyond confusion. So that's what we're doing. The others are not doing that. So by practicing patience, we actually accumulate merit and will not take rebirth in lower realms. It is we who have been patient. That does not help our enemies. This is, again, unfortunately, it'd be great. And we are connected together, but like the Buddha couldn't enlighten us, and we can't be saved by anybody. This also applies to our enemies. So us choosing to practice patience is uniquely our choosing. It's not like the enemy planned to give us an opportunity to become further enlightened. So there is this fact that our enemies are not being helped in this situation. On the other hand, if we cannot remain patient when we are harmed, then the harm done to our enemies will be of no help to anyone. So there is this, we succumb to habitual reactions, we get angry with them, and this is not going to help anybody. Moreover, by losing patience and getting angry, we transgress our vows to follow the discipline of the Bodhisattva. And this again comes back to what is it really that we are, what is our path, what is it that we've actually set out to do. So that's where we actually have the great fortune of having encountered the teachings, have the teachers, the instructions, and so on. And then we and the others presumably might not have that at all. So that's where that we are putting blame onto the other is completely mistaken. We're the ones who had decided or vowed to practice the path to enlightenment. The others, they don't have that commitment. So we are, in addition to all, you could say, the karma associated with the dynamics of the situation, then in addition to that, also here we are who have taken the Bodhisattva vow, as we did in chapter 2 and 3, then we are failing in what we set out to do. We set out to do this for good reason. So that's where we can recognize there's a lot of reasons to be patient. Okay, we're going to keep this. This is obviously the theme of the chapter. And so Santideva continues, because the mind is bodiless, it cannot be destroyed by anyone. Because of mind's attachment to the body is oppressed. This body is oppressed by pain. So the mind itself is not something that has ever come into existence. It doesn't fall under the categories in which we think exist, not exist. It's beyond that. It's completely intangible, and so there's nothing that's been created about it. We ordinarily think about things because they've been made, or they're created or produced due to causes and circumstances. The mind is not like that. In reality, it doesn't fall into these kind of classifications. And so there's nothing about it also that comes to an end. So that's, you could say, the good news. The bad news is that as long as we're stuck in delusion, then this delusion also just continues as the mind doesn't stop. So that's where you might say, oh, that's a lovely thought, that, the mind just goes on and all eternity, and it's sort of like, that's nice. But the thing is, as long as we stuck in delusion for the vast part of that time, we're actually suffering tremendously. So that's where the deluded mind that we have is presently then embodied. And that's where we have this experience of a body, and the body then comes with the whole package of birth, old age, sickness, and death. It is oppressed by pain. So His Holiness here says, as the mind is not a material thing, no one can harm it. Okay, that's you could say, the nature of the mind. When others say unpleasant things to us, they do not hurt us physically. So people might say something, and so a sage will just say, well, that's just the wind or whatever, Whereas we might go, oh, you said something really hurtful there, and then the drama happens. But in fact, it has nothing to do with the mind itself. That's how we take it is entirely up to the mind. But the mind itself is not being hurt. The body is not being hurt. If we really think about this, there is nothing that is hard to bear. We might think that if we show tolerance when people say nasty things to us, it will be thought that what they're saying is true, and the resulting damage to our reputation will hamper our success in life. So we might have that concern. Again, this is just the way that we interpret these words. There's no saying whatsoever. And in fact, all that is taking place is just someone who is saying something. But we're worried about it. His Holiness says, but there's nothing wrong with that. However much fame and praise we get, we can only enjoy it for this life. So we might have a concern about our particular situation being damaged by someone saying nasty things about it. But again, at the end of the day, this is just something that has to do with this life. So even if we did have what we really would want, fame, adulations, recognition, etc., we can only enjoy it for this life. It's a rather short-lived, inconsequential, unimportant project. As much as we, of course, in our culture, having really the notion that there is only this life, etc., that's the highest you can get, namely power and adulation and recognition and all of that. But from the perspective really of the mind being uncreated, undying, and continually going through life after life, embodiment after embodiment, this is actually rather inconsequential, even though for us it's a big deal. Again, here we're talking with a wider, much larger perspective. That being said, on the other hand, if we get angry with others, thinking they're damaging our reputation and success in this life, the negative actions we thus accumulate will follow us in our future lives. So we react, we lay down some really dark negative seeds in terms of reacting, firing back, etc. Then this is something that has a profound impact on us. So again, we have this opportunity to either purify or to again perpetuate suffering. So then Shantideva says in verse 62, and if when people slander us, we claim our anger is because they injure others, how is it we do not resent their slander when it's aimed at someone else? So we might say somebody else is slandering us, and they don't have a right to do that. They shouldn't be injuring other people. They should be nice people, they should be decent people, they should behave. But the thing is, the issue really, we say they should behave, but it's actually us who are concerned about us. And so as much as we might find it unjust or unjustified, then at the end of the day, when they are aiming at criticizing others, then we kind of say, oh yeah, well, yeah, that's not good, but we're not really deeply involved. And so that's where we don't really resent it when slandering is aimed at somebody else. Again, food for thought. I mean, we could say a lot about this, and you could sort of have all sorts of reflections around it. But at the end of the day, it comes down to that as soon as there's being, somebody's talking negative about somebody else, well, as rude as it might sound, we actually don't really care. We're mainly concerned when it's about us. So His Holiness says, when people say unpleasant things about us, if it is the nasty things in themselves that make us angry, then we should get angry also when nasty things are said about others, right? These are people not being nice. They're not being decent. They're slandering other people. But it's interesting, there's a big difference between whether those other people are us or people who are not us. So for the case is the same as far as these unpleasant things are concerned. Yeah? Somebody might say, you're dishonest. And they might say to somebody else, you're dishonest, If it happens, if our friend comes to us and says, so-and-so said I'm dishonest, we just say, take it easy, they're, you know, they this, that, and the other. We have all sorts of good advice. We're not so effective. By the way, let me just say something. I was thinking this when I was just preparing, and you know, in the Buddhist culture, we have so much. There is a big practice of recognizing the ego and the ego's games and the ego's flawed assumptions. This does not mean that we're down on ourselves, but we are exposing the cause of suffering. We're exposing the actions that actually are not intelligent. The practices in terms of our thinking, and also, of course, as a result of that, what we do and what we say, but primarily the flaw in our thinking. So we make a lot of, there's a lot of, it's not just like, let's just forget about the dualistic mind and meditate on the great luminous expanse and so on. There's a lot of just getting down to the nitty-gritty of our ordinary domestic confusion. So that's part and parcel of, you could say, mind training. And that's a huge thing in Shantideva's work here. And he is so good at it. That's why Shantideva is never bland, he's never dull, and he's sharp. And that sharpness is directed at ego. And you might say, but that's sad. I don't want to hear that I'm a silly person. but the problem is we are. And when, you know, it's like in any situation, if we are, for example, doing investments, well, you know, then if we make silly investments, we might just realize that was silly. And we might go to an advisor and say, should I do this? And he would say, well, that might be silly. You should rather do this. And then we're okay with it. So we need to understand that this sort of coming down on the ego is not coming down on us. It's just coming down on something that it ultimately really is completely extrinsic to us. And that is our confusion. I was listening to a song by George Harrison. It's on Revolver, and in it he says, there's a line that says, "It's only me. It's not my mind that is confusing things." And that's interesting. And I remember that sort of stuck with me. I had this album when I was a kid, right? And I remember just that line that differentiates between the person and their confusion. And that's what we're doing here. We have a clear sense that you could say there's a tenderness in this. There's a compassion in this. That's why we can do it. That's why, you know, in Buddhist culture, you could say from the outside, it might look brutal how we're sort of exposing and, you know, even making fun, poking fun at the confused, silly logic of our mind. But it's essential because, you know, it actually does hit a deeper place of profound suffering for us, for everybody. So we need to be onto this. We need to be wary of the ignorance that we are operating with. And as innocent as we might be, and we definitely are innocent, and our being is primordially pure, and we possess Buddha nature and all of that, we're essentially good persons. But the ignorance that drives suffering needs to be dealt with. You know, just like if we've had a bad eating habit or a bad habit of one kind or another, it affects us. So that's why we need to address this issue. Okay, so here we are then, the something negative being said. Now, if it's said to us, we're upset. If it's said to others, we don't care. For his own says, for the case is the same as far as these unpleasant things are concerned, right? The things that are being said. But when unpleasant things are said about other people, what usually happens is that we attribute the criticism to causes that do not concern us, and we remain indifferent. You know, oh yeah, well, they're angry because this and that happened. But notice our emotional sort of like, you know, the sort of reaction, the strength of it. So why do we not apply the same argument when we ourselves are the object of criticism? Okay, yeah, that's the question, isn't it? When someone influenced by negative emotions says nasty things about us, why do we allow ourselves to get angry? It is, after all, negative emotions, not people, that are responsible for the attack. So that's again where we need to say there's somebody out there, they're aggressive to us, or however it might come across. But is it really them? Actually, it's not them as such. It's something that, because just like we have Buddha nature, they have Buddha nature too. They are suffering, they are obscured, they're driven by ignorant actions and ignorance and what comes from ignorance. So actually what the problem is the kleshas, the afflictive emotions, or the toxic emotions, etc., negative emotions. So His Holiness says it is, after all, negative emotions, not people, that are responsible for the attack. And again, if we are not angry when other people are criticized, it follows we should also tolerate people insulting the Buddha, breaking statues, burning down monasteries, slandering great teachers, and so on. So, so that's an important point. That's like. It's the Buddha actually doesn't mind, if somebody smashes the Buddha statue, then it's not as if the Buddha is going to mind. It might be painful for someone who you could say is a great admirer of the Buddha to see that, but it is not something that is generated by anything other than simply just negative, confused emotions. So that's whereas Shantideva says, even those who vilify and undermine the sacred doctrine, criticize the Buddhist teachings, images and stupas are not proper objects of our anger. Buddha themselves are untouched thereby. So, what can you do? People have particular ideas, and they might decide to desecrate sacred art, sacred Buddhist art, or sacred art, period. And they might denigrate the teaching. They don't understand what it is. Then, the teaching isn't harmed, the Buddhas aren't harmed. For the sake of gaining all that I desired, 1,000 times I underwent the tortures of the realms of hell, achieving nothing for myself and others. So that's again where we need to recognize then that following this habitual projections, this ignorant habitual projection, then we've ended up having so much pain, and it didn't really do us any good, didn't help anybody. The present aches are nothing to compare with those. So we might presently be suffering. Injustice has been done to us. We're suffering physically. We have a particular condition, and so on. At the end of the day, whatever it might be, the present aches are nothing to compare with those. And yet great benefits will come from them. These troubles that dispel the pain of wanderers, it's only right that I rejoice in them. Again, so counter to our habitual way of seeing things. Like I said, Shantideva, he doesn't really allow us to sort of fall into anywhere that could somehow allow us to become comfortable. And so much of this actually is uncomfortable from the point of view that it's true and yet so different from how we think. So us undergoing suffering is something that great benefit that will give great benefit. This is like Rizin Jigme Lingpa, who would say that illness is like the broom that sweeps away the causes of suffering. So that's where what we're going through is something that enables us to achieve awakening, and through that also we can benefit others. So this is something that, unlike our habitual practices that have, in terms of negative actions that have brought us so much suffering and ultimately been of benefit for nobody, neither ourselves nor others, us presently bearing our particular circumstances will bring so much benefit for ourselves and for others. So His Holiness says, if, for example, a person condemned to death were to have his life spared in exchange for having his hands cut off, he would feel very relieved. Similarly, when we have the chance to purify a great suffering by enduring a slight injury, we should accept it. If unable to bear insults, we get angry, we are only creating worse suffering for the future. Difficult though it may be, we should try instead to broaden our perspective and not retaliate. We have been and are still going through endless suffering without deriving any benefit whatsoever from it. Now that we have promised to be good-hearted, we should try not to get angry when others insult us. Being patient might not be easy. It requires considerable concentration. But the result we achieve by enduring these difficulties will be sublime. That is something to be happy about. So here we are, we've committed to the path, we've promised to be good-hearted, and there's nothing not to like about that. This is something that benefits ourselves and benefits others. So we should stick with that. We were committed to it. We've promised to do this. It's worth everything. This is where we can truly look ourselves in the mirror and be comfortable. We can be at rest with who we are. So to completely tarnish this by getting angry and when somebody insults us, we shouldn't do that. It's not easy. That's of course, that's the entire Buddhist path is premised on the recognition that it is not easy. It's not we pick up a book and then it's like, oh yeah, I get it. No, there's a path. It takes time. It takes again and again reflecting, contemplating in this way, and it really coming to a place where we establish this as a fact, not just like, oh, it'd be nice if I could be a patient person, but actually there's serious reasons to sustain and practice patience. There is no flaw in the other as such, and there's no benefit from us reacting. This kind of certainty is what we call establishing a view. Establishing meaning it becomes not just like a nice thought, but something that really is clearly established as valid. So that's where, with that, then we then engage in meditation. We give our mind the necessarily parameters and premises, structure needed to come to its senses, so to speak. And we integrate this vision further in our everyday life. That's where we have a path. So we are not saying patience should be easy. We definitely should actually have a little bit of an aha experience going over this. And if we don't, we should go over it again and again. That's where we should be critically thinking. But there has to be a place where actually we then go, ah, now I get it. Then having gotten it, then we're at, that's square one, if you like. Then it actually needs to be integrated. So that's why we have a path. And that's why His Holiness says being patient might not be easy. It requires considerable concentration, focus, dedication, etc. But the result we achieve by enduring these difficulties will be sublime. That is something to be happy about. We will benefit ourselves, we will benefit others. We'll create a happiness for ourselves, happiness for others on the basis of that. So, 79, when praise is heaped upon your qualities, you're keen that others should be pleased thereby. But when the compliment is paid to others, you feel no inclination to rejoice as well. Again, ego, is being hung out and hung out to dry. Ego is being exposed. And yes, there we are, we're being praised. And, you say, well, look here, I'm being praised. I've gotten very good feedback and, accolades and so on. And let it be known, far and wide. And then somebody else is being complimented, and we're like, oh yeah. So that's where we need to again be humbly aware of the degree of our confusion and how it actually sits there. We're not bad persons, but we do have a little bit of a you could say a not so helpful habit, and this causes samsara. So we're kind of onto it. Shantideva is onto it. His Holiness is onto it, and we're kind of onto it too. His Holiness says, when people we do not like are praised, we normally become jealous. This is a mistake. When good things are said of others, we should try to join in. Yeah, this is sympathetic joy, one of the four boundless. Then we too may get a little happiness. So why not rejoice? If we can rejoice and feel a sense of satisfaction when those we dislike are praised, the happiness we have is truly positive and approved by the Buddhas. Well, the thing is that when we're sympathetic to others' happiness, we're actually, there's a lightness, there's a goodness that actually extends beyond our ordinary self-centering, and that's a wonderful thing. So yes, that gives the stamp of approval from the Buddha. We're definitely onto something. His Holiness says, when we practice like this, even our enemies come to appreciate us. This is one of the best ways of gaining others' respect. So this is something that universally works for us, and even enemies actually, they get that. And even if they don't, then it's still something that's worth pursuing. But it's interesting, it is something that has a great power, and actually it is something that might sort of penetrate a normal tense atmosphere between people. So Shantideva says, you who want the happiness of being have wished to be enlightened for their sake. So why should others irk you when they find some pleasure for themselves? If we cannot appreciate and rejoice in the happiness someone else might have in praising other people, in the end, we will be unable to tolerate even the slightest joy in anyone else. If that is the case, we might just as well give up anything that helps others and never even make gifts, refusing to accept anything that might please them. So here we are. We're in a pretty bad place if we can't actually rejoice when others are praised, when others are in any way provided with causes for happiness. And then we'd be in a very, very impoverished place. So we don't want that to happen. His Holiness says, if we enjoy being praised, it's wrong for us to be irritated when someone else is praising others and deriving pleasure from doing so. We like to be praised, but why shouldn't we want others to have the joy of being praised as well? Shantideva says, if even this you do not want for beings, how could you want Buddhahood for them? How can anyone have bodhicitta who is angry when another prospers? So again, we'd be in a very impoverished place if we can't accept that others are happy. Then what's this thing about us wanting to establish all beings at the level of enlightenment? What kind of bodhicitta do we have if we're angry when others are doing well? So His Holiness then comments, as we have taken the vow to attain omniscience for the sake of all beings, when these same beings have a little happiness on their own account, it makes sense to rejoice rather than to be irritated. We have made ourselves responsible for dispelling all suffering and accomplishing all happiness. So when others are happy, our responsibility actually becomes lighter. But if we cannot bear others being happy, how can we pretend to be seeking Buddhahood? When things are not going well for someone we dislike, what is the point in rejoicing if it does not make his present suffering any worse? And even if it did, how sad it would be that we should wish such a thing. So it just goes contrary to anything that if we're presently studying this book, and of course, we're not studying this book because we're developing a new policy that should be implemented in the United Nations and in our particular government. We're not studying idealism here. We're not studying this kind of totalitarian idealism in which we're onto something that everybody should adopt. We're onto a medicine that we need to apply for ourselves. This is about us, right here, this person with Shantideva, with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, onto something in which we have actually made a commitment, which is different from the kind of commitments that ordinarily are, you could say, common, and that's where we've taken this vow to bring happiness and omniscience to all beings. So that's where, if that is our objective, which is huge, what's our problem with others being happy? Having a little bit of a sort of a moment of happiness. And in fact, that should be, we have less work inside. We're supposed to be there. We aspire to benefit others, bring happiness. Hey, somebody's managing on their own to get a little bit of happiness. That's great. Like Zona says, we have less responsibility. It becomes a bit lighter. So simply, we should be happy when others are happy. Yeah. Okay. See if there's, let's just see if there's some questions. So it's a question though. So is the statement actually true? Or is it an opportunity for reflection? Now I can't remember the context, but everything that we have here is essentially opportunity for reflection. But the reflection, of course, becomes much more valid when we see that a particular statement is true. So whatever it is that you're referring to, then there Shantideva is making a point, and it's up for us to assess whether it's true or not. But it's definitely a valid reflection. I wonder if we just don't get angry at them or ourselves. We just transform the situation, and then no one goes to hell. That's true. If we could that would be very good. If we could lighten up the whole situation in which the other person just becomes clear, yes, that would be wonderful. That is very often what happens actually in the examples. If we read the lives of great sages, if you read the life of Milarepa, he was challenged by logicians that said this kind of, yogi style, this person just meditating, he probably doesn't know the scriptures at all. And then they challenged Milarepa to debate in logic. And Milarepa basically won in the logic and created a situation really in which some of these logicians were established on the path. So that's right, we can do that. Yeah. A little off topic, but can you share how you think about the current environmental crisis? Could facing the impending death of the world as we know it be like facing our own impending death? Are there any ways you personally deal with it? Yeah, that's so true. This is very much like our own death, but it goes a bit beyond that. We're presumably attached to this world. We're probably going to be taking rebirth in it again. But yes, there's different. Well, personally, on a sort of very relative level, I remember there was one North American Indian chief who says, it's not the death of the planet. It's just possibly the death of a variety of living creatures on the planet. The planet probably will do okay. It'll go through some changes. And from our point of view, these changes, of course, are they're ultimately destructive for us as humans and so forth. But the planet itself is just going through the changes it's going through. The planet will be okay. But of course, from our vantage point, this spells disaster. And that's where personally, then we need to actually engage the path and engage the vision of absolute truth and settle into that condition which is free from the ordinary constructs of time and space, settle into meditation. And also within that, of course, generate good heart and continue to generate good heart so that, whatever comes up ahead is a place in which we have greater endurance and greater capacity to care for others. So that's just some reflections here. Yeah. Could the same be said for speaking down on any sacred doctrine, though, not just Buddhist, as if Buddhist doctrine is somehow more superior to other sacred historical scripture? No, it's of course. I think I also said that of course this was taught in a Buddhist context to Buddhists, right? So there's a whole group of people who would be very upset if the doctrine was desecrated, if the statues were desecrated, etc. But of course, it applies universally. Yeah. So it's like, you know, if there's various kinds of medicines and you'd want all these different medicinal traditions to survive, you know, you'd want homeopathy, you'd want herbal medicine, you'd want some of the aspects of, you know, allopathic medicine to survive, etc. So we want all the different traditions that, of course, are very beneficial. We happen to be looking at the Buddhist teaching from the point of view of something that is particularly valid, but that doesn't mean that it necessarily appreciating Buddhist teachings means that we're invalidating other systems. Yeah? Do you ever think that perhaps all this stingy, egocentric disability hinges purely on our schooling, environmental education setup? It certainly doesn't hinge purely on it. No, not at all. It's something that is possibly stimulated by our particular, the way we're influenced by our society and our societal beliefs. But we would talk about two kinds of ignorance. One is inherent ignorance, the inherent belief in self. And that is what essentially draws us into a situation in which this kind of schooling or this kind of way that we're brought up to this particular outlook, right? This particular cultural outlook that we have. That's due to our inherent ignorance, we end up in this kind of situation. And that's where then we have the acquired ignorance. So we have the inherent ignorance of ego, but we also have the acquired ignorance of various kinds of flawed doctrines. And that's very much what we have in the outer Madhyamika teaching, a refutation of course, ego, but then particularly also the sort of what we call the extreme views, the extreme beliefs like eternalism, nihilism, and so on. And that's where Madhyamika is, we'd say, the quintessential sharp blade that cuts through our naive belief in these kind of doctrines, and it's very prevalent. So this critique that we have in the Buddhist teaching, and which very much is associated with then the middle way, the Madhyamika, but also it's implicit in what we're talking about here, really addresses two kinds of ignorance, this kind of egocentric ignorance that we have, and that is the innate, the natural that we're born with, and then the acquired. Yeah. So unfortunately, we don't really, even though, of course, we as humans, as these particular mammals, we have brains that slowly develop, and more than other mammals, it takes us particularly a long time to mature. Then we might believe that as a child, when we're sort of the whole motoric skills and so on are so primitive, that we're actually innocent. And that's very often we say, oh, children are so innocent. But yeah, they are, but they have the same potential for ego as the rest of us. It's just not developed. It's just not manifest yet. What's in the way of rejoicing for others? It's ego, and that's what we're on to here. So this is where we have this curious situation that we're very happy when things go well for ourselves, and we're strangely detached when things go well for others. And being aware of that is again where we become aware of this situation we have with ego. And that's where we need to expand. We have a habit of not rejoicing when others are there, and we should train. We should really train in rejoicing in others, not through what we say or what we do, but primarily from within. And that's where we should really equalize self and others. We should think, I'm happy. Well, that would mean I'm happy when things go well for me. That means that the other person is also happy when things go well for them. But they are happy. That should be just as important for me as my own happiness. And that's where we gradually expand. And this is what we call mind training. No other questions? Objections? If is that why having devotion, faith, and cause? Sorry, is that why having devotion, faith, and cause, condition, and effect is the basis of the path? So we can dismantle ego, i.e., be truly happy for others when they're doing well. Well, yes, it is. Yeah. When we say dismantle ego, it's really about seeing through a confused condition. So the point really of the Buddhist path is that ego ultimately doesn't exist. And even though we presently are very influenced by ego, and we need to recognize that, then the path really consists of us actually looking. And again, coming back to the example of the rope and the snake, we're not really dismantling the snake, we're just looking. And that's where we can see actually there is no snake, there is just a rope. So yes, we don't need to, I mean, sometimes we use words, in the Buddhist teaching, you sometimes have, destroy the enemy of ignorance or whatever, but that's just metaphor for those who use that particular language. And it's actually interesting because in the traditions of India and other places, very often you apply a very sort of militant language. We're going to destroy the enemy ego. The enemy that has taken us to hell many times, right? But that's just semantics. That's just language. Essentially, what prajna consists of, the sword of Manjushri is not onto some, you say, crusade against an enemy that's out there, but it's really just about us snapping out of a delusional condition. So it can be done. It can be done however, and that's where there's so many different ways of approaching this. Can you relate Rigpa and rejoicing? Yeah, Rigpa is free of any reference, dualistic reference of self and other. So that's where in that condition there is complete rejoicing in others. In that condition, there's no duality, and there's the joy. There's this bliss in which there's a complete absence of any of the ordinary sort of constraints that we ordinarily have. So so the very nature of Rigpa is really complete capacity of, it is, you could say, bodhicitta in essence, really. Can we be happy for others' worldly kind of happiness, but at the same time feel a bit sad and secretly wish they realize a deeper, more ultimate happiness too? Yes, of course. So that's where, yes, people get a new flat screen TV and they're ecstatic. And we can't go in and say, well, that flat screen TV is not ultimate happiness, obviously. We're just happy for them, but yes, let's hope they have more in their lives besides watching TV, right? But yes, whatever you could say, it's complex, that, of course, because sometimes, if a junkie gets gets more drugs, then of course that's sad, and there's a moment of just relief, and it's complex like that. So some things are very innocent, like the flat screen TV, and others, with people struggling with addictions, getting what they want. We know it's so obvious that's not going to really be a solution for anything. So it's complex like that. But yes, of course, we generally say, may beings temporarily have happiness and ultimately liberation. So bliss and then bliss. Okay, I think I'm starting to understand what you meant. Okay, good. All right. Well, on that note, then we'll dedicate. May bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it has not yet come to be, and where it has arisen, may it never fail, but grow and flourish ever more and more. Through all our births, wherever we may be born, may we be endowed with the 7 good qualities of the higher realms. As soon as we're born, may we meet with the Dharma and have the freedom to practice it properly. At that time, may we please the holy gurus and practice the Dharma throughout the day and night. Realizing the Dharma and accomplishing its essential meaning, may we cross the ocean of existence in that life. Thoroughly teaching the holy Dharma in this world, may we never tire of accomplishing the benefit of others. By this vast benefit of others, without partiality or bias, may all attain Buddhahood together. Thank you very much. See you next week.